In the middle of 2021, we went to Moldova to observe the campaign for the snap elections held on July the 11th, or the 11th night for our Irish friends. While we did comment the election, this series is meant to make Moldova as a whole known to the public, with all the good, the bad and the terrible, as well as to explain with footage the background of the election. So, when I announced that we'll be touring Moldova, not just for politics, but also for the sake of knowing this patch of land that not even Google charters correctly, one commenter said that whenever he thinks of Moldova, he thinks of the epic saxophone guy. That would be this guy. The saxophonist's name is Sergei Stepanov, and the group is called Sunstroke Project, and the representation is from 2010. Sunstroke Project is a group which reminds me of another group from Moldova with a similar history, become globally famous and then fade right back into obscurity. You might know them too. They'll be these guys. Ozon, although from Moldova, found its fame through Romania. Founded in 1998, they moved to Romania in late 2002 and 1 year later created the two songs that would make them money to this day, one of them ending up a global hit. Ozon, just like Sunstroke Project, have hit jackpot with one song, kinda like Los de Rio with Macarena. Fun fact, Dragostea din Tei is the last global hit that went viral via classical means, without the help of the internet. It was happening in 2004. YouTube hadn't appeared yet and music was still spread mostly via official channels. That is, people bought the disc from a music store and heard it on the radio. The internet was still for piracy, for the most part. Dragostea din Tei sold over 1 million discs in Japan alone and over 10 million discs in Europe. It then went on to top the charts in over 20 countries for weeks and months on end. The song, throughout 2004, was inescapable anywhere in Europe. This fact is borne in the statistics as well. Officially, in 2004, Dragostea din Tei was by far the most popular song in France, Austria, Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland and Italy. On top of that, it was also in the top 10, which means it was mandatory song in any bar or club or radio station in Sweden, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Spain, Hungary, Finland, Denmark, Russia, Norway, the Czech Republic, Ukraine and of course Romania. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because prior to the Sovietization, Moldova was a reservoir of such talent before. You know all that Jewish folklore that even today it still fills the theaters in the United States? Well, that started in the US with the first klezmer immigrants. It is Jewish folk music in a way, but not really. Prior to the 1930s, Moldovan Jews were the source for entertainment music throughout Eastern Europe and were also becoming famous in the United States starting from 1910 and accelerating after 1938. Americans watching this might be familiar with Josef Mosokovitz or Josif Moskovich. To this day, many of the traditional rhythms used particularly in the rural areas, not just in Moldova but everywhere from Far East Ukraine to northern Italy, are indeed collected, refined and then popularized by Moldovan Jews. Speaking of Moskovich, he died in 1954 in the United States, but one of his distant relatives, Konstantin Moskovich, from the side of the family that remained in Moldova throughout the war and through communism, continues the tradition today. Konstantin Moskovich is now in his 60s, but that doesn't stop him from holding concerts. The reason I'm mentioning all of these things is precisely because that's how I want to present Moldova to you, in a way that nobody else does. So, let's explore. everyone, and welcome to the introductory installment of the featured series on Moldova. This won't be long. It's more important to be specific about what this series is not. This series is not about the history of Moldova in the classical way. You are all smart people and you can read billions of words about that on the World Wide Web. There is no point, and indeed a waste of your precious time, to go again through the last 200 years of the territory now called Republic of Moldova. For the most part, we'll tell the story of Moldova through what can be seen today. Of course, there will be history, but only elements that you can't find much about on the internet. And particularly about places in Moldova that the internet barely even knows they exist, such as the monument dedicated to Karl XII of Sweden in Varnica. In English, you will find written that Karl XII, or Carolus Rex for Sabaton fans, retreated, quote, in the Ottoman Empire, unquote, following the defeat at Poltava. Poltava is now in Ukraine, and I have already shown you that city already. Anyway, in other more precise references, you will find that Carolus Rex of Sweden was captured by the Ottomans following something which English language historiography calls the skirmish at Bender. Leaving aside the fact that the city was called Tigina in the 1700s, it's worth noting that the incident is known in Swedish as Kalabaliken I Bender. Kalabaliken is not a Swedish word, but a Turkish one, kalabalık, which means a pile of stuff or people lacking order. Well, in fact, Carolus spent most of his time in Varnica, and at the time the place wasn't glued to the citadel Tigina or Bender. These are the kind of historical facts that we'll bring up throughout the series, because, you see, the territory that is today Moldova has quite a long history of capital G geopolitics meeting on its territory. In the 1700s, it was the Swedish, Russian and Ottoman Empire meeting here. Today, it's the Evrosayuz and the heir of the other Soyuz meeting here, with Romania and the USA here and there as well. Speaking of the USA, did you know that American taxpayers built roads in Moldova? The network's fan that was kind enough to drive us throughout the Republic for almost 3,000 kilometers is quite thankful. American-built roads in Moldova are the best. Speaking of places, this series will not go through the famous places in Moldova. We won't discuss about how good Moldovan wine is or bore you with footage from the Dendrarium. Everyone does that when they visit Moldova as a tourist, and you can, again, easily find billions of words about those places. And speaking of words, I intend to be quite honest and refuse both the Romanian and the Russian sensibilities throughout this series. To give you a sample to know what to expect, in Gagauzia it's Russian indoctrination that keeps the area lagging behind, not tradition or some other crap invoked in the Russian language media. And in the north, it's Romanian incompetence and Western stupidity writ large that keeps the communists going. Oh, and the nanny state mentality promoted both by the local leftists and Western leftists. It's not the fault of Russia that the West keeps on betting on stupid and continues to pour money into irrelevant tosh. It's also not Russia's fault that Romania refuses to defend its interests in the region. Did I piss off enough people already? If not, stay tuned, because this series is meant to be brutally honest, and I have thousands of gigabytes of full HD footage to prove everything that I'm going to say. The series will be structured by area for the most part. So episode 2 will be about the capital city, episode 3 will be about the south, episode 4 and 5 about the north, because the north has quite a lot to offer, episode 6 will be about the western side of the frozen conflict zone or demilitarized zone with Transnistria, episode 7 and 8 will be about and from Transnistria, or officially Pridnestrovian Moldovan Republic, and only in episode 9 we will cover the election campaign and the results and other aspects related to the July 11th election. Because only after you have known Moldova and seen for yourself the physical context in which the election took place, only then you can understand not just the final result, but also how and why each region voted the way it did. And finally, in episode 10, we will try to draw some conclusions. I can make no promises about the length of episodes or about the content. What I can say is that the idea is to have these videos as a snapshot for this moment in time, to be then revised several years from now. if I'll still be around, of course. Haste makes waste, so therefore I will take the time to polish the story, introduce subtitled portions of videos already shown on the Romanian language channel, and also some that wasn't meant to be published but somehow found its way in. It may take a month, it may take even more, but the point is to do it right rather than fast. Oh, and one more thing. The purpose is not to convince anyone to either visit or avoid visiting Moldova. The purpose is to tell a story. Moldova, in general, is a place worth visiting because it's fun. It has enough to offer for almost any type of visitor. Even urbanite Western hipsters will find something attractive in this country. And of course they will, for Moldova is a miniature of the European Union. And this series will prove it. It has frozen conflict, kinda like Cyprus. It has eco-Marxist propaganda, kinda like Germany. It still has conservative leftists, kinda like East Germany. It has newly built or recently renovated Soviet memorabilia, again kinda like Germany. Syndicalist movements, kinda like France. Weird beaches, kinda like Sweden. Glorious forests, kinda like Finland. Fabulous food, kinda like Greece, Bulgaria, Romania and Poland. In fact, it may indeed be easier to make a list of things that Moldova doesn't have and the European Union has. I could only come up with 3. Seaside resorts, because Moldova is kinda landlocked, nightlife and trains. Well, technically speaking, Moldova has trains, but you don't want to ride them. Like, seriously, just don't. Moldova even has ski resorts, even though it has no mountains. So, if you're considering visiting Moldova, go ahead. There's got to be something here that you will like. It's just not the purpose of this series to show this aspect. As for the nightlife, for a nocturnal person like me, this drove me crazy. If you're hungry at 1 a.m., well, tough luck. Moldova didn't need night restrictions due to COVID because the country runs naturally on night restrictions. Like, almost nobody is awake after 11 p.m. Ideally, at the end of this series, you'll have a better idea about how geopolitics works in practice. It's all fun and games to discuss academically about these things, but present-day Republic of Moldova is a great place to study these things on the ground, and hopefully the footage we gathered will be good enough to convey that. The main limitation was, of course, time. 16 days may seem a lot, but given the quality of the roads in Moldova and the fact that we closely watched the campaign as well in order to broadcast breaking news back into Romania, 16 days came and went. We didn't have the time to cover 2 important cities, Ungheni and Cahul. Remember the discussion about Moldovan Jewish music and Mr. Moscovici? Well, Cahul was an important part of that, alongside Galați, which is today in Romania. But that's okay, Galați will be part of the equivalent series Knowing Romania, so I can get back to that topic then. One other limitation was the extreme heat followed by floods. This, for instance, is one of the storms we faced. This one was when we were coming back from Orhei, a town run by an oligarch that simply stands out against all the others. Basically, we had to face 3 or 4 days in a row with temperatures way above 40 degrees Celsius and then 1 day of floods. And all whilst carrying video equipment with us. And we couldn't just film in the evening because public or street lighting is still pretty rare and poor. And as I said, nightlife is more or less non-existent. But these limitations notwithstanding, you, the dear viewer, have a long journey ahead through places that Alphabet Incorporated barely even knows they exist and through ramifications of geopolitics that no academic would ever cover. So with that said, let us begin the journey.